Can I request my team to start playing the video?
This is a time where energy systems around the world are undergoing fundamental changes. The balance between fossil fuels and renewable energy sources is shifting. Yet, 850 million people are still living without access to electricity. In this changing world, societies and businesses share one crucial challenge. How can we meet the rising demand for energy and at the same time protect the climate, ensuring access to clean and sustainable energy for all in an economically sensible way? To address the challenge, innovation and technological development play a fundamental role in building an effective solution, and Jinko Solar is one of the solution providers. Jinko Solar is one of the world's leading companies in the clean energy sector, pioneering the vertical integration business model along the entire value chain, from wafers, cells, to solar modules. With its 12 factories, 25,000 employees in more than 35 countries, Jinko Solar is well positioned to serve the requirements of the heterogeneous customer base. Jinko Solar is the first solar company to deliver more than 70 gigawatt panels to over 3,000 customers in 160 countries, accounting for 1/10 of solar electricity generated worldwide, making the company hugely relevant for assuring future sustainable energy supplies. Unmatched, large and diverse global customer base helps to smooth fluctuations in demand, which in turn helps the company maintain a high level of capacity, utilization, and profitability. With a highly competent and dedicated R&D team, Jinko Solar has broken 15 world records in cell and module efficiency, deployed 2,387 technology patents, home and abroad. For advanced cell technology, the company's 24.9% efficiency N-type cell continues to progress in the pipeline. Jinko Solar is the industry's capacity leader with 33 gigawatt wafers, 27 gigawatt cells, and 40 gigawatt modules by the end of 2021. Moreover, globally distributed capacity is the foundation for Jinko Solar's manufacturing excellence. Flexibility to meet the needs of diverse customers, accurate delivery, unmatched customer service, ability to quickly ramp up and maintain high yield make manufacturing excellence one of Jinko Solar's core strengths. Jinko Solar is leading the world towards clean energy transition and driving continuous innovations in PV technology to keep building your trust in solar.
Thank you for the video. Hello and a very good afternoon to all of you. This is Sangeeta here, and it's my pleasure to welcome you all on behalf of Solar Cotton and First View Group to our virtual event on CXOs Digital Roundtable on the evolving solar module policies, pricing, and technology. I would like to thank our exclusive partner, Jinko Solar, for joining us today. Now, without wasting much time, let's begin with our most awaited roundtable discussion on the evolving solar module policies, pricing, and technology. Session experts who have joined us today are Shri S.S. Mishra, who is the General Manager from NTPC, Mr. Pranav Master, who is the Director Energy and Natural Resources from CRISIL Infrastructure Advisory. He would also be moderating today's session. Mr. Rajnish Sharma, who is the Director Energy and Resource Consulting from Deloitte. Mr. Sandy Khera, who is the Country Manager and CEO from Enel Green Power India. Mr. Ritu Lal, who is the Senior Vice President and Head Institutional Relations from Ampless Solar, Ms. Tanya Singhal, who is a founder and director from Solar Rise India, Mr. Sai Charan Kupli, who is a technical director from Jinko Solar, and Mr. Manish Narula, who is the head of business development and senior director from Jinko Solar. I would like to hand over the session to Mr. Pranav to take the discussions forward with other speakers. Thank you.
Thank you, Sangeeta, and a very good afternoon and a very warm welcome to all the fellow panelists as well as all the panel participants. Currently, if you see the solar sector, it's being characterized by significant volatility that we're seeing in the module prices, some major policy changes that are there on the anvil, as well as we're seeing a rapid evolution in market dynamics. Now, in this context, I think the topic for discussion today, I think is very, very relevant. If you see in terms of cost components, almost all the major components, including modules, commodities such as steel, copper, silver, have all increased. Freight rates have jumped. Now, a confluence of these factors could impact project returns, but developers are actively evaluating mitigation measures, including diversifying the supply base, which could look at even tapping mid-sized players, having potential conversations with even Indian manufacturers, looking at technology diversification as well in terms of poly, mono, bifacial. Other measures such as hedging of positions for commodities, currency are some of the other crucial measures that are being adopted. But I think it'd be great to hear perspectives of the developers that we have on board today on the panel. BCD implementation is another critical aspect which could push up tariffs, although we still believe that it will remain competitive in comparison to thermal power. On the domestic manufacturing, module manufacturing front, BCD, if you see in combination with the PLI as well as the ALMM announcements, that could potentially provide a fillip, the much required fillip to the domestic module manufacturing over the longer term. But clearly over the near term, there could be certain challenges that we are likely to see. Again, happy to hear thoughts of panelists that we have today here. We have a fairly well diversified set of panelists across stakeholders. And this will clearly make the discussion very well-rounded. So I think without much further ado, I will jump straight into discussion with some of the fellow panelists. I'll start with you, Mr. Sandy, who's the country manager and CEO for Enel Green India. Now, Mr. Sandy, given the policy uncertainty that we have seen, the COVID related disruptions, as well as now we are seeing disruptions around the global equipment supply chain. So in this context, how are developers looking at managing the volatility in module prices or cost escalations that we are seeing? What are some of the hedging strategies that are being adopted? And since you are a foreign player, have a foreign backing, also what are there any other tools, measures that are there at your disposal as compared to some of the others? If you could share your thoughts around some of these aspects.
Sure. So thank you, Pranav, for the question. And big thank you to Jinko Solar, Solar Quarter, and the First View Media Group for inviting me to this roundtable discussion. Always a pleasure to be amongst all of you and share my thoughts. So coming to your question, Pranav, yes, I mean, with a bulk of the solar panels and modules used in India being imported, the price increase over the past 6 to 8 months is definitely worrisome for developers who have won the projects and which are yet to be commissioned. And as developers, we see that this could impact around 10 gigawatts of capacity right now, right? And what happens to some of those capacities which have been bid quite competitively remains to be seen. Also, as you talked about, there are the factors of some suppliers also kind of renegotiating or reneging on contracts, as if we did not have enough problems of COVID, PPAs not getting executed. We certainly could have done without this added challenge, right? Now, Pranav, to gauge the mitigation mechanisms and what we could do, or whether these will stabilize in the short term, it's firstly important to understand the genesis and how it all started. And you alluded to this, that It started with the pandemic, which affected the manufacturing, logistics, and the supply chain, which is disrupted, which led to the initial increase in the module cost. Then this was further exacerbated by further disruption by the floods and accidents, which hampered the supply of polysilicon, right, which inflated the price further in a short period. On top of that, you had the other raw material cost increases, especially glass, EVA, and the exchange fluctuations as well. And just when we thought that the prices had stabilized after a while, they started increasing in the last quarter of 2020. And this was on the back of projects being conceptualized on high efficiency bifacial modules, right, which required more glass, which caused a bottleneck in the glass processing capacity. And then, as you mentioned, the freight rates also shot up about, in some cases, 5 to 8 times. The pandemic also caused a practical issue of extended duration of clearances. So all these kind of have forced developers to look at alternatives, right? Now, in terms of, you look at the Indian market, you started looking inwards at the alternatives, but then that doesn't really help the situation, because the local domestic market is still quite behind in terms of size, scale, and technology. So although the government is promoting local solar manufacturing, the investment activity has remained low. So when it comes to requirements regarding also bankability, the quality, pricing, etc., it does remain not as competitive as you would like them to be. So in terms of the strategies for mitigation, as you mentioned, I think diversification is something which is what developers are focusing on, like us, and diversification across 3 segments, right from expanding the supplier base, procuring not just for kind of from one source or looking at multiple sources, also tying up with large suppliers, entering into framework agreements to supply not just for the Indian market, but for global markets, and have that bulk procurement benefits. But then again, the Indian market is very price sensitive, and there are challenges. Some people are also working on supporting the domestic manufacturers by importing cells and then looking at assembling modules. And then the question is of supporting on working capital, bankability, quality, etc., that I talked about, and the challenges of scale. Also, one needs to look at diversification in terms of technology mix, different types of modules, bifacial, mono, and poly. Between them, some price hedging can be expected. Most importantly, have robust contracts in place, have forex hedging in place, quickly move to contract negotiations, issue the notice to proceeds, and use your global relationships and pricing advantages that you have with that to ensure that contracts are honored. I think it's time to work at innovative solutions, right? Look at strengthening relationships across the board, create frameworks for long-term arrangements. Ultimately, it has to be a win-win for all parties to make things work in these uncertain times. And also, it's time to create backups, right? So it's something like the what you do in venture capital, right? You spray and pray, you diversify, and then you hope that something sticks. So that's what I think most of us are doing. Also, the other challenge is on the ground, and the uncertainties on policy that you talked about, right? And a lot of moving parts. I mean, EPCs are also struggling to keep up their commitments and schedules, leading to execution delays. And this all started with the pandemic as well, right? Then I talked about earlier the significant issue of piling inventory of projects awaiting PPAs to be signed. This is impacting the ability of developers to raise project financing for the awarded projects. Then you have the issue of BCD applicability coming in from next year in April, and the ISTS charges waiver period ending in June 2023. So there are a lot of moving parts, and the situation is grim. Let's face it. And as developers, we actually are looking at the government now to provide some support and breather and relief and flexibility in terms of timelines to rework solutions with these various parties that we work with, and to get the projects back on track. Thankfully, the ministry, especially MNRE, has been really supportive to the industry, especially in handling industry concerns during the pandemic, and that gives us hope. There is reason to believe that there is light at the end of the tunnel, and I just hope that this light is not of an oncoming train, because we can't afford any more regulatory shocks or policy shocks or adverse court orders on land issues, etc. Right? Be it the developers or the manufacturers or the EPC players, I don't think any of us have any more strength to sustain any more punches. So yes, we all have to work together and find a solution along with the government.
Yeah, thanks. I think very valid points raised. I think there is a substantial capacity which could be impacted upwards of 10 odd gigawatts, and I think alternatives are limited in that sense, given that the domestic capacity is not adequate or not of adequate quality scale. And I think the way out of this is, like you rightly pointed out, diversification, and I think building stronger relationships and supporting each other when it is most required. Because I think, like I also mentioned and you highlighted, that there are a lot of moving parts, and in that context, I think it becomes very, very critical to leverage these relationships and work together as a team to make it work. I think that's very, very critical. Thank you for those points. And I think one of the points I'll take up further that you raised with Mr. S.S. Mishra, who's the general manager for NTPC. You raised a very relevant point, Mr. Sandy, which is something which I'd like to pose to Mr. Mishra. Sir, here with the imminent BCD that is there on modules and the consequent impact that it can potentially have on tariffs, including for projects that have been bid out and awarded, do you think that there will be some impact on signing of PSAs with discoms? I know you play a dual role, so you are an implementing agency as well as you are a developer yourself. But this is more on, you could answer it donning your hat of an implementing agency. So I think this is clearly a concern among industry participants. Also, a lot of financial investors that we've been working with and been in touch with. This backlog of capacities where PSAs have not been signed. So, what are your thoughts? How do we ensure that this kind of happens? And what's your take around that? Because further now with BCD, tariffs could potentially go up further. So does that result in some further stress?
Yeah, I think you have well said. Definitely, India being a price market and NTPC, we are in both role as an implementing agency, as you said. We are bidding also, executing the project as a developer mode where we do not own the project, and then we are as a developer also directly into the market. So that way we feel the heat both sides. Here there was definitely a big into among the discoms and all the prices coming down, so PPAs, it was easier to sign PPA. But at the same time, it is I think our duty also to support Government of India as a long-term view that things Make in India philosophy, to promote Make in India philosophy. Definitely, it is a difficult. PSA will be difficult to sign. Discoms, depending upon their health, and when the price will come down again, when the Indian market also will get stabilized, sufficient module cells and everything quantity will be flushing in the market, Indian market, then the price will come down. But there is a gap in between, as you mentioned, there is a gap in between. So this point is to be thought at government level, at everybody as a developer also should be thought. What should be the bridging gap? I suppose people were talking about ALMM also. So the concept is not bad. Concept is very, very ideal. You can say it is an ideal concept to happen for any country to adopt a procedure to filter out the, say, bad quality or bad manufacturing or not a long-term manufacturer. The concept is ideal. But here, again, I will say there is need is a bridging gap here. Bridging gap means suddenly we have BCD and then ALMM also, and then the module or say cell or the all value chain supplier is to be created in India. The base is to be created in India, or the investors from outside has to come here and establish and then set up their entire value chain, whether it is module, cell, or completely wafer and all. For that, I think time should be given. Time should be given to establish market. And then, because here what is I'm hearing from all developer also, that suddenly they feel that supply constraint could be there because of these things. But of course, the government side, there is a lot of assurances. Okay, we'll clear LMM in very fast manner. Those assurances are there. So we hope that with those assurances, say supply chain will not be disrupted. But I am very disappointed the way pricing is going up and up. Really, sometimes I am not economist. I am a pure technical guy. I am heading RE engineering department in NTPC, but I am directly since involved in the decision-making process of many things. So it is very unfortunate that the pricing is going high for every commodity in spite of not a big demand, at least in India part or I don't know, worldwide also. It's not a demand surging. Whether it is steel, whether it is all anything, say CRGO, transfer materials, copper, or even glasses, as our previous speaker told, that all commodity prices are also increasing. So these two is basically playing a role where discoms, ultimately what you are telling is both way. It is going to impact. The cost is cost increase in this way or some other way also. Both is going to hamper basically the PPA, signing of PPA, or easy way to capacity addition. So this will put a
Sorry to interrupt, but are there any innovative solutions that as an implementing agency you're evaluating? Like in the interim, sometime Seki was talking about, pooling of PPAs which didn't go through. So are there any such innovative?
Very well said. There are a lot of way the policies and change in policies are under discussion only. That we should not go for project-wise, say bidding and all. There should be a pooling mechanism and all. But those things, anyway, whatever is our motto should be to bring down the cost efficiency, and of course, by supporting Government of India motto that Make in India should happen here, and the quality products should also be there. Scaling for developer side, but at the same time, developer side, because I am also a developer, so I can see that I always see that there should be a big scale. If manufacturer and the total value chain, there is no scale available here, then again there will be a further price rise. So again, it will be a cascading effect. It will be a cascading effect basically. So the problem here is one phase we are trying. Government is trying that capacity addition should be there in spite of pandemic and all. We should not stop. We should go for capacity addition. Other side, there are other say points which is directly or indirectly is putting some kind of break on that. So the collective, as he was also telling, that the collective thought or collective say suggestions can be taken from all stakeholders, including all manufacturer, national or international, everybody together, and then. Of course, the bankability is a very right point. The bankability of the project also, that is equally important. And in this bridging gap, something can be thought. Maybe more push towards the say ability of capacity. So suddenly, with this, we find that there is some kind of limitation. And again, there is a commodity price rise. So again, one price plus a second price plus third price, it is getting stacked up. So then ultimately it will affect the project. It will affect the running ongoing project. It is going to affect the project in pipeline, everything together. So mechanism should be there. I think policy as a policy maker or as a key players also, everybody should put forth their suggestion to ministry, and there should be some kind of solution also, at least for this bridging gap also, there should be some mechanism.
Sure. No, sir,
Otherwise,
fair
it is a
point.
matter of
Yeah.
concern. It is a matter of concern.
Correct. Yeah. Because then otherwise it leads finally to cost overruns, time overruns. It's not able to pass through and
everything
Yes.
together, everything
Right.
together, no doubt.
Sure. Thank you for that. My next question is to Tanya. So if I see, Tanya, if we read what the government has essentially done, to my mind, they've adopted a three-pronged approach. One is the levy of BCD. Second is the implementation of the PLI scheme. And last is also the announcement of the ALMM. So how do you see the interplay among all of these panning out, and what is the kind of impact that you see on the developer community on the back of this?
Sure, Pranav. So thank you first to Solar Quarter and all my fellow panelists. And, I can't agree more with what Sandy and Mr. Mishra just said, and I'll pick certain excerpts of what they said. But Pranav, coming directly to the question you asked, I think as developers, one of the core things we ask for is clarity, right? If we know what pricing and what policy decisions are expected, we can price that in our bidding numbers, and we can with open eyes go in with even higher tariffs, because that way it protects the returns for ourselves and our investors. So what we're looking for is clarity, which is why the government's move on BCD was a very welcome move. Why? Because they have very openly declared that from this window next year you will have safeguard, like duty on modules that you take. Safeguard duty will end. There'll be a period of no duty, and then there'll be a period of BCD. So there is enough clarity for you to price that in any bid you do. And from our perspective as developers, we will always buy the best quality at the best price, right? So if I look at the Indian modules today, they are definitely at par in terms of quality with the international peers. At moments, they get stuck in terms of pricing given the inefficiencies in India, but with that BCD, it gets a level playing field, and that's great. So we're excited when something like this comes up and gives more clarity. On the contrary, the ALMM scheme is not as well clear in its intents when it comes. So today, if we look at the ALMM list, has about 8 gigawatts of manufacturers listed on it. However, the pipeline and the capacity we're looking to build next year is almost 12 gigawatts. There is a clarification that the ministry very kindly has given, that the ALMM list can be expanded to anybody who comes and registers by that time. But let's be all cognizant of the fact that in time of COVID, right, we are still saying that that factory audits and factory visits will be done for the developers and for the module manufacturers, and they'll be listed online. So in that sense, on a pipeline of 12 gigawatts, an ALMM list of only 8 gigawatts, and the fact that of this 8 gigawatts, only 4 gigawatts is right now listed on Bloomberg, it doesn't leave that set of clarity for the developers, which is where you are uncertain of what to do. So tipping the point that Sandy said, right, we will want to bring up framework agreements. I would love to do a framework agreement with Jinko, Jay, or all the other developers, but right now they are not on the LMM list. So how do I go ahead and do that? Right, there is a lack of clarity there. I would love to go ahead and do that with a lot of the Indian developers, but today they are stuck because a large chunk of their capacity is being exported. And for the 4 gigawatt list, almost 10, 12 gigawatts developers are chasing them. Right, so that doesn't leave a good situation. The PLI scheme, on the contrary, is very helpful. Why? Because it will help boost that industry. So had this thing been done in a bridge gap analysis, where we would have said that the LMM scheme will only be applied to say 50% of the list available, and beyond that you can procure anywhere, that could have been a bridge gap arrangement available to the developers. right? You know that, okay, if the list of 8 gigawatt is there, a part will get exported. The rest part is mandated to a certain pipeline capacity. And beyond that, pipeline is free to be taken over. So let's say 4 or 5 bids get ALMM mandated and the rest then becomes open. That would have been a very decent way to bridge this gap. However, saying that today any bid that happens by a OM order, whether it's SECI, whether it's this thing, will have ALMM, doesn't give you that flexibility, right? It doesn't give the international module manufacturers the time to ensure that they can come over to India, get their factories validated, visited, and get listed on ALMM. And it even doesn't give the Indian manufacturers that required time to build up new capacity on the backing of such a great PLI scheme that is coming over, right? So if I would have looked at this perspective 3 years hence, we are in a very good shape. We will be looking at 15, 20 gigawatts installed in India, high rated mono to bifacial efficiency modules. But to get to the 3rd year mark, how do we cross that path is where the clarity is missing. And that's what troubles us as developers.
Right, I think very valid. I think clearly, I think Sandy also pointed out there is a mismatch in terms of the demand and the supply, and I think the COVID situation has just made things worse. And it's not only the case for international suppliers, but also for the domestic ones. As you can see, there are limited ones that have been enlisted so far. They're talking about at least a year or time for some of the others, to get enlisted. So it's a long process, and it can result in a couple of quarters of lull, and targets going for a toss, slowdown in pipeline, etc. So clearly there is repercussions, and I think if we were to see, I think the banking industry is relying on renewable energy because a lot of other sectors are not really doing that well. So I think in that context, it can have material repercussions. Thanks for your views, Tanya. Since we're on this topic, I'd like to pick Manish's brains as well. Manish, looking at from being from Jinko Solar, what is your view on the ALMM list? How do you see it evolve, particularly for international manufacturers, timelines that you're seeing? What are your thoughts around the same? Manish, you're on mute.
Sorry for that. Yeah, thanks for putting this direct question to me. I think I would really like to support what Tanya just mentioned in terms of the policy not being very clear in terms of ALMM. Rest policies are really doing very fine. In terms of ALMM, if you look at it, the way government has structured the scheme, they have given sufficient time for all the players to apply for ALMM. I think the scheme came into being from early 2020, and Jinko was one of the first few foreign manufacturers who applied for the audit process. Unfortunately, due to COVID, due to several other reasons, it could not get implemented, and we did not get a chance for getting the audit visit by Indian experts. The fact here is that in terms of the plan that ALMM now shows, it's a limited plan. What Tanya just mentioned, we don't have enough visibility in terms of how it will cater to the need of our industry at present. There could be some options. There was a bridging mechanism which Tanya just mentioned. Additionally, we could also do the way we have done in BIS. MNRE is not doing its own module testing. MNRE lab or any such government lab is not doing any testing. MNRE or BIS is going by third-party labs for approving all the test results which are coming for the submission of BIS applications. Same way, MNRE and NICE could appoint third parties for audit visits to all the global manufacturers who MNRE team could not visit due to COVID restrictions. The travel restrictions are in place, but there are no dearth of experts available in China or elsewhere in the globe. There are so many expert labs, expert people, doctorate level people who are experts in auditing such factories, who have actually audited our factories during its implementation also, and who are giving us regular certificates and approvals. So MNRE and NICE could definitely take help of those third parties and put them on the audit process. This will speed up the whole ALMM process for the global manufacturers as well, and also bring more capacity availability for Indian projects. As we know, the capacities are 8 gigawatt, and out of which, I'm sure people have their own compulsion to export to various countries for gaining better, average selling prices. It's fine. So additional capacity should come from global suppliers who are credible, who are also in tier one, and we could manage through those audit visits by a third party experts, and MNRE could believe on those reports and use them for additional manufacturers into the next round of ALMM list. So that will make enough capacity available, that will bring the prices also down, because I'm sure in the next coming bids people would not like to consider global manufacturers because they are not in the list, and people are not aware how long it will take for them to be listed into the process. So people will take their own bet on domestic players and unnecessarily create a kind of a demand supply mismatch, and bring the tariffs higher, which will become another burden on the discoms. As we have a very long backlog list, I think it will increase to further backlogs. So that's my limited point of view on particularly to ALMM. We are willing to subscribe to it, and we are willing for the any kind of visits. Just it is a green signal that we are awaiting from MNRE on this.
Okay, I think valid solutions that you put forth.
Yeah, just one point. I have
Yes.
heard that there was some issue of visa and all giving visa. Is it right? It is just a question from my side.
Sir, visa definitely is an issue. Even being an employee of Jinko, I cannot travel to our headquarters in Shanghai. But I'm talking about the experts, who are available within China, from UL, from TUV, from those kind of high, level of credible, global laboratories. So they can be deployed by MNRE and NICE, because NICE and MNRE could not form their own team to send them to China to have audit done. So in lieu of that, and without wasting much time, because we don't know when these visas will be available, when the travel restriction will be, eased out. So we have to use some kind of a mechanism, which we have already seen in BIS. It happens. We use all the labs for the certifications, and BIS accepts the lab reports. So same way, the audit report by third parties could be accepted by MNRE and NICE, and then used for the listing of all global players. That's my
reason. I think although NICE was telling that my team is ready with visa issues, but this is also a good thought that, okay, to overcome this problem, maybe visa because of any reasons and all, the industry should not suffer, an industry
exactly.
To support industry. I think this also mechanism can be followed. I think this is a good suggestion.
Yeah, absolutely. It makes a lot of sense to ensure that this gap which exists gets bridged. I think it's very, very critical because again, it's going to result in the same thing, high degree of uncertainty. What happens? Should we bid? Should we not bid? Pricing, availability of modules. So I think in that context, I think clarity here becomes again very, very important. So thanks for those inputs. Ritu, I'll move to you. I think in this backdrop, I think I'd like to get your perspective, given your focus on the CNI market in this backdrop. Costs are escalating. Policy changes at a state level is what impacts your business materially. And we've seen a lot of waivers being done away with, including for group captive in certain cases. So how are you seeing the impact on these escalating costs on the CNI and open access market? What kind of conversations are you having with potential clients? Are you seeing even contractual implications happening? If you could shed some light on that.
Okay. Thank you, and thank you, First View and Solar Quarter for the webinar, and it's been a pleasure to listen to all of the remarks from the fellow panelists. As far as the CNI segment is concerned, if you look back to where we had envisioned as a country where we would be in 2022, okay, let's just take 18 months away because of the pandemic and say, okay, if not 2022, maybe like midway across 2024, we'd envisioned a 40 gigawatt of, say, rooftop solar. Because when we talk C&I, we talk distributed solar, right? And again, I think we use the term rooftop loosely. I think it meant to signify distributed solar, right? We're sitting at 6 something gigawatts today, far off the target. And we're not missing it specifically because of the pandemic. Whatever growth has happened, frankly, in the C&I space has almost happened despite policies and not because of them. It took about 2013, 14 when and there were some other companies in this space that kind of pioneered the C&I solar power as a service, taking the PPA model that was there in the utility scale and then kind of replicating that for private parties, right? For solar power. We had to create the market. It's still today, setting up solar is not anybody's inherent need, right? So you had to do a lot of creating the market, reaching out to customers to help them understand what they would gain in the long run, right? And then the prices started to crash. And you saw what happened around 2015, 16 itself. We had grid parity across the C&I space. And from then on, every unit of solar that was used in the C&I space was giving them, apart from the green, which was always something of an incentive, it was giving them commercial savings. And that changed the dynamics of the push-pull. So instead of developers having to really push solar down to C&I, the pull factor increased. If anything, the pull factor post-COVID has increased even more. Because I think at every level, individual, corporate, government, this need for protecting the environment has been brought even more to the fore during the pandemic. Last year, if you remember pictures of, from Punjab, we were viewing the Himalayas. Something which hadn't happened in decades, simply because, traffic, there was less pollution because of emissions. Those kind of things were happening, and unmitigated. I know COVID is a different example, but the impact of nature has become very important. And as individuals, as governments, as different agencies, and at the corporate level, look at in the last 15 or 20 months, if you look at how many corporations have now declared their pledge towards going more green. I think it's been very, very densely packed in the last 15, 20 months. That's on the green, sustainable side of it. Then comes the cost factor. Because of whatever has happened economically across the world, and specifically, we are seeing a huge amount of contraction. Earlier, there was a lot of debate on should I wait any longer? Will the prices go lower? As a user of solar, so as a C&I customer, if I wait it out, if I negotiate harder, maybe I can get 20 paisa lesser, or if I wait down another 6 months, it will become even cheaper. Do I go the capex route? Do I go the opex route? Those discussions were happening. Cut to now, not too many people want to go down the capex route because that ready availability of cash is not there. Most businesses have been hit, and they don't want to delay their decisions any longer either. It's come down to the point where anything for cost efficiency must be implemented now. So again, we see a huge rise in interest for solar power as a service, or the BOOT model or PPA model, or whatever you call it, which is what companies like us have primarily been working in. So there's a lot of demand up there. But because it hits the revenue of distribution companies, the greater the demand, the greater the repercussions, and the greater the kind of restrictive policies that come in from the different state regulators, protecting the short-term, and I call it short-term because short-term interests of the DISCOM, and I'm calling it short-term because DISCOMs are not in distress because of renewable energy. DISCOMs are in distress for historical reasons. This is just, one band-aid that can easily be applied temporarily. But we all lose out, in the long run, if you are reducing the adoption of green energy, the loss is the planet's. You forget me as a company and then India as a country. We all exist on the same planet despite our geopolitical issues, right? So this is like a very temporary kind of immediate pushback that we get that, restrict this, go on to cross metering, don't do this and don't do that. Whereas that will not really fix the DISCOM's problem, right? That is on that aspect. What is happening with ALMM, PLI, BCD? The biggest issue is we don't really have clarity, and I'm not just talking about clarity on policies. I am talking of long-term clarity about where are we headed, okay? One, we were told that there is going to be a gap between SGD and BCD. So SGD comes to an end of July, and customs duty comes in April next year. But is there certainty on it? There isn't. There is still this question of whether SGD will continue in a slightly reduced format for one more year or whatever 10-month period. We don't have clarity, right? Then you come to ALMM. We got in BIS very, very recently, like a couple of years ago. What is so different about ALMM from BIS? This would have cost us money to implement, right? When you're going, visiting, doing technical checks, etc., and certifying something as approved. What is the goal? Why? What was, can we understand clearly what was wrong with BIS? Why did you have to duplicate this, right? Is there any particular reason why, and this, I'm not talking of which country, why only these 14 or 18 people who are in, and so far, correct me if I'm wrong, it's only those manufacturers which are present in India that because of, the present scenario, it's only those guys who have been certified, right? There is, Tanya mentioned about the demand supply gap. That is not going to help on the price front, right? We also have an end goal of energy security, of low cost, high performing and reliable energy generation. Is that not the end goal? And these are all means to get to that end goal. So this is something which is a little confusing to me, and especially if, there was something wrong with BIS, or if BIS was inadequate and you needed to get ALMM, perhaps the timing should have been different, right? A lot of other suggestions have come in on how you can use, reliable and reputed labs internationally for ALMM certification. Then you come to PLI. It reads beautifully on paper. But if I look at it, and if your end goal is, across the supply chain, you're going to have independence and domestic manufacturing. That is about minimum three. And at 3, I think you will not even get past wafers, right? It will take you minimum 3 years to start doing wafers. And if you want to move to polysilicon, I was told, and I'm not technical, that it is minimum 5 years ago, right? So we see real, back up the value chain, manufacturing only kicking in perhaps 2028, 2029, right? Now it is estimated that by 2030, we are going to have 300 gigawatts of solar installed in the country, right? So by the time we have all of these PLI schemes, coming into place, a lot of the country's immediate potential will have been exhausted. What will happen to all of those people who are setting up? It will only work. You can, this BCD and other such measures and protection. Yes, it's required, but it is only a short to medium term measure. In the long run, if these people who set up manufacturing are not able to compete globally, it's not going to give us anything. Those facilities will come in, and those facilities will, barring 1 or 2 or 3, they will not sustain. So we really need to think long term about the choices that we are making. I understand reliance, I understand being, self-reliant, Atmanirbhar, but I don't think that literally means you can manufacture everything that you need internally. It should be focused more on having the ability to source, whether through local manufacturing or through reliable imports or through substitution, everything that you need when you need it and at the price points that you need it. And if we focused on that, perhaps, we'd be addressing these issues slightly differently. How do we tackle the price volatility, right? Which is really what is destroying a lot of bids that have already gone out. There are debates happening in organizations saying that do not wait until August, because by the looks of it, even if safeguard duty is not extended, the way prices are rising, you're better off importing today than tomorrow. There's a lot of uncertainty. So I sometimes think that when you try to take on too much, and if there is, internally we lack that clarity and cohesiveness of thought about what the final goal is, I'm not very sure if these policies are really going to help us long term.
Yes, I hear you, I think, quite well. I think on the CNI front, I think in today's context, I think it's never been more important in terms of sustainability. I think be it irrespective of size, geography of organizations, I think across the board, we are seeing material adoption of renewable energy. And I think in today's environment, cost savings becomes even that much more critical, given the financial constraints which players or manufacturers are working with. So I think, the CNI market in that sense becomes all the more critical, I think, as we go forward. And I think the other points that you made, I think, are loud and clear, I think, and echoes also a lot what some of the others mentioned. So I think as an industry as a whole, I think there is a fair degree of uncertainty that exists. Some things may not have been completely thought through from a long-term perspective. And knowing that some of these will happen only over the long term, we could have had certain, some measures which could help bridge that gap in the interim. So I think those are some of the, thoughts that I wanted to make. So thanks for that, Ritu. I think picking from Ritu's point, Rajneesh, and thanks for your patience. So I think I'll just pick from there. I think your views in terms of, so, in the past also the government has had taken several attempts at resurrecting the domestic manufacturing sector, right? What is your view specifically on the PLI segment, on the scheme, and do you see any material impact on ground in terms of implementation? And from your perspective, are there any key changes or improvement measures that you think which will help improve effectiveness of this scheme, if you do not think in the current shape and form it will have any material benefit?
Sure. Thank you, Pranav, and thank you for having me here. So maybe I will be very quick. So if you see from a government perspective, I recall even 10 years back when National Solar Mission came, apart from capacity addition, manufacturing was also one of the focus. So over the years, we have seen a lot of policy initiatives, DCR content, all these things are coming over the time. Now, definitely PLI scheme from a government intent, it's a good scheme. It's more towards towards making effort on domestic manufacturing. Now, there are 2-3 things we need to keep in mind. Definitely, we all know solar manufacturing is a game of scale and definitely high efficiency and R&D. Now, scheme definitely touches upon on scale. They are trying to promote 1 gigawatt plus kind of capacity, promoting integrated facility. Now, one thing where I think as a country, typically, especially in this segment, have failed is on having an integrated ecosystem in general. See, module cells are fine, but this is more about a semiconductor industry in general. When you talk about polysilicon or ingots and wafer, you see China, why China has done so good. I mean, their complete semiconductor industry is highly, highly robust and competitive. I mean, a lot of PCBs, everything, your TV, laptop, everything is getting imported, right? And China is one of the pioneers on them. I mean, when you think about putting a polysilicon or a say ingot wafer, and only from a perspective of solar industry, it may not be able to achieve that scale. But yeah, cell module you can think of. So I think having that maybe government needs to touch upon those aspects also, how to have an integrated ecosystem. But yeah, definitely it is a good intent. I mean, we had like SIPs, modified SIP schemes earlier also, but definitely it will give some kind of support to the domestic manufacturers, because we already know we have like 8-9 gigawatts and there is a new capacity we are trying to focus on. Second is on the R&D. Now we need to understand, see, China, one, obviously they have scale. The margin typically is low. It's a thin margin business, but scale in general. But what about the R&D? I mean, are we thinking about the next level also on high efficiency modules and other thing? Although the policy talks about that, because China already has a big capacity on existing technologies per se. I mean, I recall some of the earlier debates when a lot of experts were saying, let's not focus on the current technologies. Let's think about what will come after 4 or 5 years and plan around those technologies and install capacities around that. Because if you see the Chinese manufacturer, they already have 10 gigawatt, 25 gigawatt kind of supply capacity. So, I mean, competing them is a tough thing. So that's point number 2. So R&D is one area where government should also focus a lot, because if we have to sustain in the long run, we need to put a lot of investment there. And also, I mean, testing facility, I think a lot of experts talked about that, that there are issues around that. But yeah, I mean, when you come talk about R&D, the testing facilities should also go up. That's a point number 2. There was a lot of discussion around commodity volatility and others. See, commodity, I mean, my experience, commodity volatility always will remain. I mean, whether it's on the any type of commodity, right? Now, from a developer perspective, they need a policy certainty, whether it's on a taxation, custom duty side, or whether there is a very high variation on the commodity side. So I think the contractual arrangements, the policy certainty has to be there. I mean, points also indicated by Ritu also. I mean, if you have that kind of lack of clarity, there may be an impact. But if you say that, okay, next 3 years, this is the case, then everyone will factor that in their bids and, look into that. So having that clarity is very much required, given the current circumstances, especially with COVID impacting the complete supply chain. We need that policy clarity. But yeah, I mean, key thing, integrated facility is a key if you want to, take it on a long-term perspective. Otherwise, you'll always depend on import on ingot, wafer, and polysilicon, and their prices will increase. I mean, if not cells and modules, those countries can increase prices on those imported commodities also. I think I will keep it short. That's it from my side, Panna.
Thanks. I think some relevant points in terms of integration, R&D, etc. I think those are very critical.
Just one query from my side, whether this commodity price, whether it is silicon or all commodities related to value chain, the increase, what is happening is very, very sharp. It is pinching every developer. Is it logical increase, or it is some gaming or some kind of some other things are happening? I'm totally confused, because this kind of increase nobody has seen, and it may not be a supply chain imbalance also. this typical increase for everything. You just put everything, anything, there is an increase. And that too, not a logical manner, very, very sharp increase in such a short span of time. Is it really logical?
I mean, maybe I will make a quick point around that. See, sir, my perspective, market is not always logical. There are a lot of factors which go in. I mean, somebody monopolizing and other things. I mean, you rightly talked about cement and steel. I mean, even if you don't import, you see how the rates have gone up, in spite of the fact that this has been COVID for last 1.5 years. So that's point number one. Second, there are a lot of global disruptions happening. I mean, shipping industries in general, if you see, I mean, they are going, a lot of those are going in the verge of bankruptcy itself. So there's a lot of, constraints on that part also, which in a way is impacting the commodity price also, sir.
I think there's a lot of liquidity that is chasing some of this in certain cases, and then raw material prices for all your manufacturing, be it steel, all the inputs there also are rising. And I think in that context, I think across the board we've seen a material increase in costs. I'll just quickly, in interest of time, jump to Saicharan. Thanks again for your patience. I think we had a fairly long list of panelists. Sai, I just wanted your thoughts on, given your background, wanted to understand, what are some of the top technology trends, that will drive costs down further or lead to LCOE reduction, but at the same time, increase or improve performance. What are your thoughts and views on that?
Right. Thanks, Pranav. It's not long waiting, which I love to hear most of the other panelists' views on the same topic, which trying to gain some kind of knowledge on that. That's great. And coming to the topic of how exactly any kind of developer who will be much more interested in reducing the LCOE part. And in this particular process, what generally is happening within the entire value chain is how optimization is getting happened with the existing technology. We can even try with 25.4% kind of technologies, which is what is there as a kind of input, or going top of 25.4%, which is already there with 26.8% with HJT. Some IBC kind of technologies are also there with 28%. But all these particular technologies are not in mass production. So definitely these all existing high efficiency technologies, maybe they may add value specific to getting or reducing the LCOE pattern specific to the entire costing mechanism of the project. But in the mass production of these particular solar PV module production, it's not going to help that. So if we just try to see for the next 8 quarters or 12 quarters, what exactly is going to be prevailed in the market, which is going to be in mass production again, is definitely going to be M10 wafer size, which is 182 wafer size, and 210 wafer size. And earlier, if we just try to see these particular same kind of wafer sizes down the line 10 years back, they used to come at 300 micron thickness. And now optimization has started, and then these particular thickness has been dropped down to 170 microns. And the only fact is that we just need to check whether reliability factor is getting mitigated or not, whether it is going to sustain and withstand for that particular lifetime period or not. If it is getting sustain and withstand it for those particular period of years, definitely it is good to go kind of solution as per the existing IEC code criteria, as per the existing recent IEC codes. So that way, even the module manufacturers, everyone, not just only limiting to module manufacturers, for the entire solar PV value chain, everyone are trying to optimize the existing things. And if you just try to see the new or the latest technologies, which is what is there in the market, yes, on the PERC side, which is what is there in the crystalline silicon, where mono-PERC technology has already started widely getting accepted across the globe. That has happened way back in 2018. But for Indian market, it started in 2020. And if you just try to see for 2021 onwards, even wide acceptance on the bifacial technologies also has started improving a lot, which is why we could see 2 rupee tariff, a similar kind of a lowered LCOE mechanism with a tracker kind of solution has been implemented. And these are the kind of new developments where every developer started trying to capture in their existing financial models. This is one part of technology. And on top of it, if you just try to see down the line after 2 years, definitely IBC kind of technologies or PERT is one kind of technology which generally comes with N-type kind of technology, where the existing technologies are completely P-type, silicon P-type doped mechanism technologies. But going forward, definitely N-type is going to take majority market share. That may happen after 2 years. And as of now, if we just try to see with the existing demand, which is what is their entire globe, which is close to around like 160 gigawatt. Out of this 160 gigawatt, close to around like on the manufacturing capability, if we just try to see, close to around like 200 gigawatt capacity is getting manufactured only on P-type, and N-type is having only single digit gigawatt capacity across the globe. And for that particular matter, even if you just ask me, Jinko being as a kind of global leading solar PV module manufacturer, not just limiting only to single technology, but just even on the N-type technology also. If we just try to see that, even we are also restricting ourselves only to 700 megawatt kind of capacity with N-type. But rest all, it's like we can even touch up to 40 gigawatt kind of capacities with P-type kind of technology products. The only reason is that N-type is having low degradation factor because of no oxidation property of that, which is why most of the astronomical applications always try to go with these kind of N-type materials. But going forward, due to having these kind of lower degradation factors, definitely N-type technology like PERT kind of technologies are going to prevail in Indian market as well. Going forward, as of now, it's being used only in niche markets where that has got a different preferential tariff altogether, preferential price altogether for these kind of N-type technologies. But yes, beyond N-type, we can see that HJT is also going to come in place, and beyond HJT, IBC or per site, where in which the efficiency of this particular technology can be touched up to 30%. And we expect that these kind of per site kind of technologies can touch to global markets in commercial manner, maybe down the line at by 2028 or 2030 kind of timeline. So this is specific to a technology optimization or technology expectation. But yes, on the LCOE part, if you just try to see, definitely on the CapEx wise also, a reduction in CapEx or reduction in OpEx is also possible with the existing technology options like 192 wafer size, which is being used with 4 square mm cable. And if you are trying to connect two strings, if you are trying to go with a kind of Y connector in the string design, definitely that reduces your CapEx calculation when compared with 210 wafer size module, which is coming with 6 square mm cable. So that way you can have much more better saving with M10 wafer size kind of modules. But yes, 210 wafer size kind of modules, which is what is there in the market, they're not so matured in the market. And maybe down the line after 8 quarters or 6 quarters, 210 wafer size also can take its own prominence with the same kind of power class.
Sure, thanks, Sai, for those thoughts on the technical and the potential evolution on technology that we are likely to see. I think in interest of time, I'll just, a couple of questions which I'd just like to leave it open if anybody wants to take or has some thoughts around, one is any specific recommendations, suggestions that anyone would have for the government from a policy or a regulatory perspective. I think one clearly is in terms of clarity, long-term clarity, which will bring about sustainability. But other than that, anybody would like to make any comment around that in terms of policy or regulatory suggestions? And second, if anybody wants to take a shot at, where do we really see module prices in the next 1 odd year? So I'll leave that open to any one of you would like to take a shot. Otherwise, we can jump to some couple of questions that have been raised. I think there are a couple of questions which have been raised. I think most of them are around module pricing and how do we see the difference of pricing between multi and mono, especially when polysilicon prices are fluctuating. I think if Manish or Sai, Charan, would you like to take this?
So if you just try to compare the kind of cost differential between poly kind of module or multicrystalline versus monopo kind of technology, which is what is there now. So the delta wise within the manufacturing segment, if we just try to see, definitely there will be a delta of more than 2 to 2.5 cents kind of thing. But the kind of benefit, what exactly you will be getting with monopo kind of technology, where monopo is now standing at 530, 540 kind of power class. And whereas the poly is standing at 330, 335, maximum 350. Not even with polyperk, it can even touch up to 360, 365. So considering this particular gap of 200 watt peak variation, where the delta specific to savings, not just only limiting to capex or specific energy yield, or even with the OPEX part, we easily can see more than 5.5 cents to 7 cents kind of benefit on the overall calculation, which is what is there on your model.
Okay. I think some of the other questions have been answered during the discussion. I think in terms of, I think Rajneesh brought out the point that how integration is critical, and until and unless integration happens, I think Ritu also pointed out that, you will still have only modules, and your wafers, etc., are a long time away in India context. So I think some of those questions, have been answered.
Yes, few questions.
I think has the imposition of BCD led to a upfronting in module procurement? Does any of the developer want to take a dig at that? What the question is that, is there any preponement happening because BCD is going to be levied in April 22? So is there any upfronting happening in terms of module procurement currently? Sandy, Ritu, anybody wants to?
No, I mean, for our project under construction, of course, we're sticking to our schedule, which was anyways prior to March next year. So not to that extent, but yes, I mean, I keep hearing these stories of people. I mean, it sounds like an incredibly interesting business model, right? We could all become traders and procure. I mean, but unfortunately, I mean, if that kind of arbitrage was available so easily, we'll all be sipping pina coladas on Malibu Beach right now, right? I mean, I'm not too sure, but it's quite the environment is quite uncertain, right? Because on the one hand, even if you try to upfront, I mean, you don't know what happens to, as Ritu had said earlier, and Tanya had mentioned, you don't know what the SGD trajectory is also going to be, right?
Right.
And then you have the question of PPAs not signed. Yeah, and PPA is not exactly ALMM plus PPA is not signed. Discoms demanding that BCD change in law should not be imposed on them. So quite a few uncertainties to deal with. So I'm not sure if aggressive bets like those can be taken. But again, I'm speaking from a pure developer standpoint. It could be great for manufacturers to kind of supply if they can.
Yeah, I just would like to add up on this, where we keep on receiving inquiries regarding the same thing, where in which this particular window, where exactly starting from August till March 2022. So it's quite evident for us, where in which we could people are expecting us to deliver much more capacities than in a normal case. So people are expecting something on that, where in which there is no SGD, no BCD, no duty or taxes, which is going to be there. But we are hopeful that it should not be. If that is going to be there, definitely it will be benefiting at least few of the developers in that particular window.
Sure. I think that's it. I think we're out of time. If anybody has any, closing remarks from anybody, any thoughts that anybody would like to share, otherwise I'll kind of round it up with some of the points that I've just jotted down through the discussion.
This is Manish. So just want to
add
a few perspective.
Sure.
I think my video is not working right now, so sorry for that.
No problem.
I just want to add a few points that any country has a right to protect its local industry, and it is a most welcome step to have all these things in going hand in hand, whether BCD, ALMM, PLI, but at the same time, till such time these things are implemented and giving the right product on ground to support the projects, because project bidding is happening constantly, at least 8 to 10 gigawatts bids we are getting every year. So to that extent the availability has to be ensured, and beyond it, as definitely India has to go from 10 gigawatt to 15 or 20 gigawatts annually to reach to 300 gigawatt targets. So to support that additional capacity, yes, we have to bring in all these PLI schemes or protectionism by way of BCDs or LMMs. But till such time, you don't have the capacity available where you have to implement the program and you have, PPAs at stake. I think one should not be too much aggressive on such things and leave some time and allow the market to, grow on its own, and let the things take care of itself in a year or so. I think every panelist has this view that policy uncertainty is a main cause, and not leaving any room for tariff improvement. Because we have seen historically low tariffs now, whereas I don't see even discoms cannot sign on those tariffs. What will happen if tariff increase because of BCDs and lack of clarity, and due to any other LMM list, not being fully subscribed by global and domestic manufacturers alike. So we have to allow level playing field and see what market, what it can take, and leave it to the developers to choose the right product. This is my take.
Sure. Thanks for that, Manish. I think we've had a fairly good discussion, and I think a lot of thoughts pouring in terms of, initially the whole piece on developers looking at diversification as a strategy, potentially also looking at framework agreements. I think that's a very valid point. I think Manish, you also spoke about, looking at how we can bridge the gap for the ALMM until, given that we do not have adequate domestic capacities. So, the demand supply gap or the mismatch that exists, needs to be really built up, and not that gap has to somehow be met prior to some of these schemes kicking in. Integration R&D is something also that we spoke about, and I think letting market forces determine how things pan out is going to be very critical. So I think a fairly well-rounded discussion, and thank you all for your thoughts and inputs, and thanks to the First View Media team and Solar Quarter for arranging this discussion. Thank you all. Take care.
For wonderfully moderating the discussion.
Thank you, Pranav. Thank you all.
Thanks, Pranav, and all other panelists to bring out the best from our thought process, because unless we are prompted, we do not open up so much and share our thoughts that openly. Yeah. Thanks for prompting us, all of us. Thank you.
Thank you, Sangeeta.
Thank you very much, all the esteemed panelists, for such an insightful session and sparing your precious time and extending your support for this event. I would like to thank each and everyone who joined us today. So with this positive note, we are ending today's event and promise you to come back soon with more knowledge-driven virtual events. Till then, it's bye from our end. Please do take care of yourself. Be safe. Thank you.
Thank you.
All right. Thanks a lot.
Take care, everyone.
Bye-bye.